We will go ahead and get started here today. I'm Diane Smith, and I'm the director of the Francis Rose Center here. It is a school that we started back in 2000. It's hard to believe all that time has passed. We initially started to do department overviews for our own associates so they could get to know what all we do. And we have slowly transitioned into more agency-facing sessions where you can find us do a monthly onboarding or refresher for our agents. And then we have done these specialty sessions as well. So the last time we did this aviation session was, I think, 3 years ago. You may have seen it, and I'm very happy to welcome back Travis French and Chris Tate. Travis is our aviation practice leader here in Arlington Row, and Chris is an aviation senior broker. We are going to do some updates today for you. So it is a full 1 hour session with a lot of conversation. If you have questions, please again put those in the chat feature and we will look to answer those during the session. So to get started today, for those of you that work with us here at Arlington Row, we're primarily a P&C broker, property and casualty, and aviation is indeed unique. Today, we're going to discuss how you go about writing aviation policies. Not every agent out there understands that we even have the ability here to write aviation accounts, or do they understand how they can access us for that? Today, our brokers, both Travis and Chris, are going to address that. They're going to provide a broad overview of the marketplace and discuss their roles and responsibilities here at Arlington Row and how they make it easy to do business with us. So with that, I'm going to turn the session over to you, Travis. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, the history here of aviation at Arlington Row, and get into that deeper dive of what you're seeing in the aviation marketplace.
Thanks, Diane. My name is Travis French. I've been with Arlington Row since July of 2002, so I'm in my 23rd year. Arlington Row has had an aviation division since 1991. Just to give a brief history, it was actually started by my mother, Connie French, in Louisville, which was the first satellite office for Arlington Row outside of Indianapolis. Connie worked here from 1991 all the way until 2018 when she retired. So since then, we are now at a full-time staff of 6 people who specialize solely in aviation. We have 4 brokers and 2 support staff. All 4 of our brokers have a minimum of 10 years experience in the industry. Some of us quite a bit more. We're writing business in all 50 states in aviation. Most of what we do is admitted business with some surplus lines. I know that Arlington Row has a large specialization in excess surplus lines, but in aviation, the vast majority of what we do is admitted. We work with roughly 30 markets now in the aviation space, which it's a fairly drastic change from when I started. I think we had maybe 10 companies at that time. So obviously the capacity has expanded greatly in the space. Some of our relationships with those markets go back 35 years, to when the division started. But we have great relationships with the newer companies as well. To that effect, with all these companies, as I mentioned, the capacity in the marketplace is pretty significant right now. The abilities and appetites have increased substantially. We're in a bit of a soft market cycle at the moment. Just to sort of touch on that, every market is cyclical. Aviation is no different. What's been slightly different about this most recent trend is our last hard market, which lasted roughly from 2019 until approximately the end of 2023, depending on who you ask, was very short. We didn't see a significant correction in a lot of pricing in many areas. It was sort of prompted by, if everyone recalls, those 2 large Boeing losses that happened around 2019. And then also there was a large ordeal with Russian confiscation of airline aircraft, which affected things at the highest level on the reinsurance level, on a global scale. So everyone sort of thought that would drive the hard market for a significant period of time. But due to the continued increase in capacity and new entrants into the marketplace, that portion of the cycle just didn't last very long. So, there was some increase in profitability for the markets in between 2021 and 2023. And I mean, just my opinion, not to the point where it led to a significant enough correction in pricing, but nonetheless, here we are back in a soft market right now. Things still feel a bit unsustainable to me, but that remains to be seen. We've seen a lot of our markets branching out. So in addition to new entrants, you have existing companies now increasing their offerings, writing more lines of coverage. To give an example, I know you may not be familiar with the name, but Beacon Aviation is a company we work with for 10 plus years. They wrote strictly workers' compensation. Now they are writing aircraft, auto, CGL risks, just about anything. So that, coupled with the new companies that have come on board, that's sort of creates the excess of capacity we have at the moment. And also there are direct writers out there that we don't work with. There's a new one that just came around, specializing in older pilots and turbine aircraft. You have companies like Avemco that have been around for decades writing things directly. So, in addition to the markets that we write with, you've got companies out there, the progressives of the aviation world, that are doing things direct without necessarily having an agent involved. I thought that it was common when the market was hard to see new entrants come in and to see the capacity try to increase as more players want to get involved, as they saw potential for prices to increase. Now that it's softening, I'm still not convinced that we're going to lose a whole lot of this capacity very quickly. It seems as though a lot of them are still trying to find their place in the market and eagerly write business and get a foothold so that they can stick around. That has to be seen. Obviously, with the newer companies, one or two large claims, especially in aviation, where we deal frequently in high limits and large physical damage exposures and liability, et cetera. It doesn't take one or two big ones to cause a change in that.
I just want to ask you, with the longevity of these carriers that we've done business with, and then adding obviously more, we've had some changes here over the last few years. Can you elaborate on our situation where we find ourselves? You've got the soft market, all these people writing aviation, but from a key differentiator standpoint, our relationship with the carriers and where we stand with them, and why agents would come to us for that expertise. Not to take your topic away from you.
No, you're fine. Well, so with these, with the existing carriers, the way we've always done business, which is do it the right way, be honest, act in the insured's best interest. They've appreciated that over the years. I like to say I learned from the best from Mom. I always appreciated it, and have many agents have told me over the years how much they enjoyed working with her, just the way she handled things. So, she instilled a strong sense of integrity, and that's always shown through in our work. And so the sort of the traditional longstanding companies have always appreciated it. They go out of their way to refer business to us, and just to tell us all the time how much they appreciate doing business with us. The newer markets, in a lot of these cases, what you have are people who retired from one company and partnered with another, someone similar. And so they went out and just secured new backing. And so they're still doing what they've always done. They're underwriting, but now they're doing it under their own little umbrella. They're new startup. So a lot of the people in the industry aren't new. It's just their roles in new companies. That's what's changed a lot this time around with the new entrants. In the last soft market cycle, you saw a lot of new people, new faces. This time around, not as much. It's a lot of the same people you dealt with for years. Now they're just wearing, a different logo on their shirt.
Logo.
So
and I got to give kudos to your mom too. I've worked here twice in Arlington, and you are indeed aviation royalty. I should have mentioned that when I introduced you, because I worked with your mother in the early 2000s, and you are indeed correct about, her building that foundation, which we've obviously springboarded off of to, now you heading up the aviation department. So it is good to hear that the carriers recognize us and they understand that we're going to come to them with, full narrative, complete submissions, and we really do know how to underwrite that business. Can you get into a little bit more about how we are that liaison for the agent?
That's basically our primary role. Obviously, as a wholesaler, we anticipate working with independent agents who aren't likely to see aviation with any frequency in their day to day, and so we don't expect them to be experts in anything related to aviation. I mean, Chris will touch on it. If you can write P&C insurance, you can probably handle most anything in aviation. But that's what we're here for. I mean, at this point, I feel like I've probably forgotten more than than I'll even remember. But we've seen so many types of risks across so many sectors that we've in lots of ways just seen and dealt with it all. And having done this 23 years, I've got a good feel for when you bring a risk in. Where does it need to go? What do we need to lay out as far as information to get a quick and accurate response? We've had all the practice in the world, and the same is true for the other brokers too. Chris and Allison both were former underwriters with our aviation insurance companies, so they've seen things from the company side as well, and obviously not working on the brokerage side, but I mean, they have the perspective of an underwriter, and now they bring that to, the production side where we are. So all of that serves to our agents' advantage. I mean, not to I feel like I'm tooting our own horns a bit, but we've got the personnel and the experience to handle just about anything you've got. So, you don't need to worry about your lack of knowledge, because we are your full service back end resource for that.
And that's excellent to hear. And to know that they came from carriers, that they have that underwriting background. Obviously, any agent coming to Arlington Road to begin with, it can be a scary prospect. And even if you're a seasoned person, you're a prime example. We can write home and auto. You can tell I've been an agent. So again, we're kind of greatly situated here at Arlington Road with our experience and background. But anybody coming in that writes auto and home, maybe small business all day, and then all of a sudden they get a phone call, and maybe that doctor that they've insured for the last 10 years bought an airplane, right? And they don't know, what do I do with that? So this is a great example to share that expertise and to your own horn, because I do believe it is a key differentiator for us in the marketplace, what we have here at Arlington Row, and I'll say, the guidance that we provide. And no question's a dumb question. You are very unique, right, in what you do. So everybody should feel comfortable about sending that email or picking up the phone and calling you if they've got a bite or a lead on a risk.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing we want to see is for an agent to handle all the lines for a customer, like you mentioned, home and auto, or they've got a boat or an RV, but leave an aircraft out because they weren't comfortable insuring it. Or if someone's son or daughter is looking to start flight lessons, well, they wrote a non-owned policy, but they farmed it out to one of the alphabet houses or some other organization. In other words, we don't want to see you have to leave that piece out there. If we want you to insure the whole package for your clients, and if there's an aviation risk to it, then that's what we want to facilitate.
So then, how is the marketplace right now, other than you see it soft? Can you kind of explain that a little further even? I mean, I know there are a lot of people, a lot of carriers that have come on board, and like you said, they're looking to make some money. What is that looking like? Are we seeing them leave the marketplace? Are they doing well? Are they in a state of flux? Where is it all at?
Well, it seems, I would say, for the last, call it 2 to 4 years, it seems to have been a one-way door. They're coming in, but I have not seen any leave. In some cases, you've seen carriers pull out of a certain product line. Work comp is a good example, where we used to have 6, 7 markets writing workers' comp. Now we're down to 3 or 4. So, that's about the only thing that would even resemble an exit. For the most part, the others that have come on board, they're here to stay. You're seeing a lot of capacity growth on the lower limit end of the spectrum. There's not companies coming in that are offering 300, 500 million limits, like we've seen with our, classic carriers. So they're limiting their exposure in that regard, which, I mean, that probably lends itself to the fact that no one is leaving, because no one is really putting them at risk of any catastrophe hits. For the customers, it's just been purely beneficial, especially for non-commercial risks. If you're just a private aircraft owner, you've likely seen your premiums decline over the last year or two. It is still relatively new. I say 2024, but it really started to ramp up in 2025, meaning the soft market aspect. So if you maybe not if you haven't been through a renewal cycle, just depending on how it was timed, but for the most case, it's, prices are going down across most sectors. When we get into the commercial side, I wouldn't paint it with as broad of a brush. It's a little bit inconsistent there, and for several reasons, which I won't get into that necessarily, but yeah, just by and large, there is very little right now that we can't do. There is the capacity out there to write just about everything. When the market was hard, you might have been down to one or two placement options for an older pilot or a transitional risk. Now you have 3, 4, 5 or more options for that same risk. So it's unlikely that you're going to hear the word no when you're trying to, no matter what scenario you're talking about. It can probably be written.
And speaking of scenarios, so we've done a lot of discussion here. Aviation is a plane, right? I mean, I had it on the opening slide. There's a plane. We're talking pilots. You mentioned, children going in and, getting some flight training and learning how to be pilots. But let's get into, and I know Chris is going to elaborate on some of the uniqueness of it all. Can you just give us a broad brushstroke overview of when we say aviation? It's widgets, and I'm not going to, again, steal your thunder here, but it's anything, right, that has to do with the plane. Can you talk a little bit about that? Beyond the plane.
Right. I mean, obviously, yeah, the center point of aviation starts with an aircraft, but, the branching out from there, there's airports, there are aircraft and aerospace product manufacturers. All of the ancillary lines that you would be familiar with just through working in P&C are going to be applicable in aviation: workers' comp, property, professional, auto, CGL. So all of those things that exist in the regular P&C world, they're here in aviation. There are fixed base operators that do repair and service, fueling operations, hangar operations.
It's just soup to nuts, right? A to Z.
Right. In just about every municipality of a certain size, you're going to find a general aviation airport across the U.S. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of them. So, all of those things come under aviation. Courtesy cars at airports, helicopters, seaplanes, kit planes. It's
very, very broad. And
yes.
And you're doing a good job illustrating that, because you just never know as an agent what type of risk somebody is going to bring you. Mm-hmm. And again, your expertise is shining through. So what else do you have for us on the state of the marketplace this morning?
Well, that's probably the most pertinent information for right now. Just is the significant increase in capacity that we've had, and just a general softening of prices. You would think, with everything that's been in the news this year with aviation, that things were not going well. But that's not the case. It can be very deceiving. Safety is actually increasing. Losses, especially aircraft flight-related losses, are down compared to where they've been historically, and that's due to safer, more efficient aircraft, more automation in aircraft operation, better pilot training. So, all of those things are good in that they are, leading to a more, I guess, better price risks for those who have to purchase the coverages. But
that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, that in a nutshell, I would say that encompasses the sort of the current sphere we find ourselves in aviation.
Well, you've done a wonderful job. We have, had some changes here over the last few years since we first did this. And I'm very happy to hear, the safety features, obviously the technology and automation, the training for safety, all of those things have helped the public at large all along the way. And I love the fact that you said very seldom are you going to hear a no from you. So that's wonderful for agents to hear that. So with that, let's go ahead and welcome Chris Tate. And Chris is a broker here in the aviation department. And Chris, you're the one that does the underwriting, and we'd love for you to get into explaining the steps and, submitting a quote and writing a policy with our agents. And what would you say to them when they bring you a risk and they don't really know where to start?
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate that. So real quick, I've been doing aviation insurance for 29 years. I started out as an aviation underwriter for about 7.5 years, and then I went to the retail side in a P&C agency, worked there for 13 years. I was doing P&C as well as aviation. And then I came here, it'll be 9 years next month, here at Arlen Thoreau as an aviation broker. So it's nice because I understand the conversations that you're having when they're yelling at you, when they're, trying to explain things to them. Longest part of that was the longest period of time was 13 years of doing that. So, but back to your question, as far as when someone sends something to us, first of all, as Travis mentioned, you're always welcome to give us a call. Give us a call, say, here's what I've got, here's the exposure. And that's nice because that way, as you're talking, kind of the gears are going in our head going, okay, well, you've got this exposure. What about this? What about the auto? What about the property? What about the workers' comp? Or the aircraft, maybe it's a general liability. So yeah, you're always welcome to give us a call so we can just kind of talk it through. And then we know what application to send you and so forth. But once I receive an application, I'll look it over. I'm going to, see what's missing, what's there. Normally there may be a couple follow-up questions on what about this, what about that. And then, once I have all that put together, we're going to send out an application. And we do try to send out a complete, very clear submission and so forth. Specifically during the hard market, you got one shot. If you had, lacking information or whatever the underwriters were getting because the market was so hard. I mean, some of our renewals were 20% increases that you had to blanket market it, which is what we don't normally like to do. But because underwriters were getting every risk instead of a select number of risks, it was like drinking through a water hose. And so they were just quickly going through and going, no. Okay, we'll take a look at that one and so forth. So you really got one shot. And you may come back 20 minutes later and go, oh, wait, Travis, I have this additional information. And they go, oh, thank you very much. I would have quoted that, but shoot it back to me next year. I'll take a look at it. So we try to give them all the information accurate and easy to understand what's going on with the risk when we send it out to them.
We had talked before about comparing writing an aircraft policy to an auto policy. You just touched on that a little bit. And I love that as an agent. If you're writing auto all day long, it's pretty simple, right? It's just you need the accurate information.
Correct. Yeah. As far as, the comparison between an auto policy and aircraft, both policies have physical damage for the vehicle or the aircraft. We call it hull instead of, physical damage. It's going to have liability coverage for the ownership, operation, use of the aircraft. There's medical coverage involved in that. Instead of comp and collision coverage, we have in motion and not in motion. An airplane is in motion when it's moving underneath its own power. So basically I say you put the key in, you turn the key to start the engine, it's basically in motion at that point. And so forth. Just like on an auto policy, you have we get driver's information, name, date of birth, driver's license. We're going to ask a little bit more than that. We're going to name, age, their certificates and ratings, their total time, their make and model experience in that particular aircraft. If it's retractable or if the gear folds up or if it has two engines, we're going to ask additional information there. If it's a jet or a turboprop engine, we're going to, most likely require annual recurrent training. So we're going to ask about the training. We may ask for a pilot history form to kind of look at their whole experience. So a little bit more thorough than what you're going to get on an auto, but still it's the same thing. Some of what we call your personal aircraft, what we call pleasure and business. Most policies have some premises liability on there. So if we need to add the airport as additional insured, we can do that. There's no additional charge for that 99% of the time. So, so that's kind of the differences and the similarities between auto policy and an aircraft.
You have told me before when I was out in the field, tell them not to just even worry. Don't try, just call me, because you're going to step through all of those things you just mentioned with the agent.
As Travis says, we're going to walk you through it, whether it's before you go out and meet with them. We're going to talk you through that. What additional information, here's the application we need, or applications. Here's some additional questions I would ask as far as that. Once we get the terms, we're going to send you a proposal. I think Travis and I and Josh we're going to be a little bit more than just here's the quote, let you review it. We're going to kind of spell out a lot of that information. I'm notorious for highlighting on my proposals and so forth. And then, as you have questions, we're gonna help you through those, so that you have a better comfort level explaining it. Because I think I think Travis kind of alluded to it, but we get calls all the time going, I've written their home auto, life insurance, health insurance for 20 years. They just called me, they bought a plane. Or, hey, we've got insured that we've written their manufacturing company. We just found out that 15% of it is aerospace or aviation related, and there's an aviation exclusion on the Cincinnati or auto owner's policy. Can you write the aviation portion of it? Say, yes, we can write the aviation portion of it, but we're not gonna. You can keep the P&C exposure in the policy. We're not going to write it all. We're just going to write the aviation, just like you're only going to write the P&C. But that way you keep your commission. You don't have to worry about the aviation exclusion because we can carve out that portion of it.
You had mentioned about, working with the agent to help with the insured. You operate a lot like some of our folks in the professional liability area, where if the agent really doesn't understand the risks, you will get on the phone with them, with their prospect, with their insured. You will meet with them, whatever it takes. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, most of the time we were able to just kind of talk with the agent and walk them through the questions and kind of give them a better feel for it, help them with some of the lingo. We don't expect you to understand all the aviation jargon and lingo and so forth. That's what we do. But we're going to help you through that. And there's times where like, hey, would you mind if we got on a conference call or a Teams meeting or Zoom and get the customer and you can talk to them, and we're happy to do that. So that they get a comfort level who we are. We answer their questions. They know we understand what they're talking about. And then there are we've done some rare occasions where we're going to go out and meet with I've went out and visited a college in Michigan. I've went to Florida and visited a large flight school that we write down there. So I mean, we do some of those inspections and meetings as well and so forth for the larger ones and so forth. But whatever it takes. Again, that's what we specialize. I'd say 95% of our agents are not aviation specialists if they've touched an aviation risk at all. I mean, they may have one or two. We've got some, I see one of our agents on here, we write a lot of stuff with them. I've referred things to them. I mean, so, but, we're here to help as little or as much as you need and so forth.
There was a note out here about municipalities, and Chris, we had talked about that. And I know Travis mentioned it. I grew up in a small town just north here in Indiana, probably population about 20,000 people with a municipal airport. And they are all over the Midwest here where our agents are. So we also know within those cities and towns, there are those pockets of wealth I think about Kokomo, Indiana has a large auto division there. And I know that some of their C-suite people are probably flying in and out and all around. So while we know those planes and those exposures exist, can you get into a little bit more about the uniqueness of some of the things we see, even beyond the Midwest? I know in our last session, we talked about like seaplanes in Alaska and things like that. Can you elaborate on some of the unique risks that we see in Wright?
I would say Alaska is a different animal. Other than that, within the lower 48, they're pretty much. Every risk is different, but there are a lot of similarities. An aircraft policy is an aircraft policy, but what's the aircraft? What's the pilot? Do they match? Is it a transition? Is it a stair step transition, or have we jumped completely down to a different level and so forth? So we see a lot of all of those. We get a student pilot that wants to buy a jet or a turboprop aircraft, or so we get a lot of those. Yes, we do the seaplanes. You see that there are certain states that have the colder winters, and they may want some to put floats, amphibious floats, or skis on their aircraft. We've written a number of those. Like I said, Alaska it is totally different, and it's a lot of the carriers, they have one person or a group of a few people that are riding that exposure. It's not your everybody, because it is different. There's a lot of times where the plane crashes, they just leave it and they'll just write a check, because the cost to sit there and to go find it, recover it, bring it back is going to be far more expensive and repair it. So far more expensive than just to write a check for that, minus the deductible.
But in the lower 48, we've probably got agents here, Minnesota. I'm thinking about, I was just up in the UP recently, where they have those cold winters. They could bring those types of planes to you. We are able to look at those as well. And then let's pull it really back into the Midwest. What about some of the unique things like down in Southern Illinois, where they're using drones to, not only look at crops, but maybe for crop spraying, crop dusting.
Sure.
And then I know like the real estate market started a little with drones, but now it's just huge. Like they're able to really show you all things about the property. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I did look yesterday. I believe we write over 400 drone related policies. So I think a quarter of those are those spraying drones that are doing the spraying and so forth. So the 300-ish of those are your real estate. Could be an adjuster, could be a contractor, someone there's a construction site and they want to get a view of they want them to view the whole site, and they can kind of take a look at it from the air and so forth. They're doing mapping. Sometimes farmers want to map out their farm and so forth. But yes, when we get into the spraying of chemicals, seeding. I've seen somewhere where they're spraying, they're putting chemicals into ponds or lakes or whatever for one reason or another. We have drones where they're using them for cleaning windows, or they're spraying a building to clean it and so forth instead of using a guy on a scaffolding with a pressure washer. There are concrete contractors that are using them to spray. They put over the sealant over the concrete after they've smoothed it out and so forth, and they said they get a better spread when they do it with a drone versus spraying it with a hand sprayer. So we can do any and all of that.
That technology is amazing. How much it has advanced. I think about just a few years ago, how much more you're elaborating now on the usage of the drones, and they're getting big. One of the agents just noted 50 plus pounds, right? It's growing.
Sure. And
then what about, like, we hear about delivery of items. Do we write anything like that, or is it in the future?
I'd definitely say it's in the future. I don't know to my knowledge, if we write any of those yet. I know I was in Texas. I was in Dallas about a month or so ago, and I was out in my brother-in-law's backyard and I hear something sound like a car and look up and it was, I'm assuming like a Walmart or whatever, delivering something in the neighbor's backyard. So that is definitely coming. I know it's in certain states. I know Arizona, I think Amazon had a couple of them that crashed about a month ago. There was a crane that was up high and apparently was right in the flight path and it didn't avoid it. So, but there definitely is that. And back to the drone spraying, I was talking, I write an account that has aircraft that they use for spraying. And the insured had two of these aircraft, bought a third, and he told the agent just a few weeks ago, he said, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to pass this business on to my sons because of the ag drones coming on. He goes, but I thought I had a couple more years. He said, I was wrong. He said, he said it was a really bad year. So,
He retired his plane and because of the drone usage,
well,
right?
he's going to probably have to sell at least one.
The efficiency is there again. Then technology has increased, so much over the years, and just the things that you've mentioned today, I had not heard of like the actually replacing window washers, right? I mean, it makes sense from a safety standpoint as well. So, anything else unique that you've seen this year that you think is just going to maybe, really explode in the marketplace? I don't mean that. I mean, not a plane explode, but a class of business, something that's unique, maybe something in airports or something that's just brand new that we haven't seen a lot of. Anything coming up?
I know that there are airports we've all seen, we've seen, where there's like aviation communities where there are people buy homes and properties, around the airport. There's a homeowners association and they've got their garage is a hangar that they parked the airplane and they've got a taxiway that connects to the airport. I've seen a little more of those I've got one airport down in Georgia that is building large hangars that you can put a little apartment inside of that a hangar as well that they can use for that. So we've seen a lot of that, almost. And I've got a couple where they're like, it's almost like a condo association where they buy a large hangar with multiple units within that and they're selling off the individual units to individuals. So, but yet the owner of the condo owns the structure itself, and then the individual owns the individual hangar within there and so forth. So, I write a decent amount of air shows, like your aviation special events. It might be they're going to a convention and they need it for something, or it's a fly-in, or like I said, an air show. There's a lot of these wheels and wings.
The ones that do the banners.
I do write a banner towing operation. That's an owned aircraft situation. These are more of a special event, maybe somewhere where they're doing. It's a big event, and then they've got on the side either they're launching balloons, or they're doing like airplane rides, but the other carrier will not cover. They're going to cover everything else. They cover the animals, the little carousel or whatever they've installed there for the unit, but they won't cover the exposure for the aircraft or the helicopter that's doing the flights and so forth. So we can write those for you. So there's a lot of the wheels and wings that I write in the summertime. I probably write over, a dozen of them just for that. So there are, a lot of those in the Midwest, a lot of Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana type stuff and so forth. So
anything recently that we've written from a very large scale when you're looking at risk that was unique? Again, I'm going to go back to the marketplace. You've done a great job illustrating some of the new things that you're seeing. But anything of a very large capacity, maybe, you've got an agent here in the Midwest that's been in business for 30 or 40 years, and then all of a sudden they get a lead on something totally unique, large, unique.
Well, again, you've got small and large airports. Like I said, there was one in Maine I just worked on. The town owned the airport. They leased it to a flying club. And there was a lease agreement, but there was no coverage at all. The town didn't have an airport liability policy for it. The flying club didn't have general liability for it. Then there were owners on this. There were members of the flying club who owned hangars on the building, on the premises. They didn't have premises liability for it. And, so you were kind of multi-level trying to cover all the different exposures, making sure and so forth like that. But yeah, so back related to hangars, we can do the hangar if someone owns the hangar. We can do the premises liability. We can do the inland marine if they got a mower or something like that, or a tug that they use to pull the aircraft in and out and so forth. I just wrote a sales and service operator for drones. So they were selling the ag drones and so forth. So we wrote a policy, an aircraft policy for the demonstration of the drones. Then we also wrote a general liability policy for the sales but also the service and repair of those drones and so forth. I recently wrote an aviation products complete ops policy for a company that was making engine parts for experimental aircraft. Builder's risk on a large hangar at a large airport. Again, a bunch of fly-ins. I wrote about 6 fly-ins in September.
So even though the market is fairly soft, it's softening, you have been very, very busy. And I think a lot of that really has to do with what we're seeing. Again, the technology, new things developed, people, again, these pockets of wealth where they buy a plane or they want to invest in something, or they've got the condo hangar concept is very unique. And the fact that, you might have an apartment, you can stay there and jump in your plane. Those are the kind of things that we see very, very unique. With that, thank you so much. Chris, it's that soup to nuts thing. And our agents out there appreciate your expertise and the fact that you have been an agent. So I want to reiterate to all of our agents that have joined us, Chris is there. He answers his phone. He gets back to you. He has the answers. So please take advantage, of his background, his expertise, and his understanding, the sense of urgency that you may have. You've got a kudo out here, how extremely helpful you are. Read insurance. They do want to know if we write home builds like an RV, and it says 14. I'm not sure what that is. Is that a kit for you would write? Okay.
Yeah, it's a Vans RV. It's a very popular model. There's multiple models of the RVs, but yes, we can write the builder's risk for that and so forth. I saw a note on here about talking about municipals with hangar keepers. So on a airport liability policy, along with the premises products, personal injury, fire, legal, medical, there is a coverage called hangar keepers. But basically, it's kind of like similar to garage keepers. It's when an aircraft is in the insured's care, custody, control. So there are a lot of airports that but there's 2 ways to rate that. You can rate it contingent and primary coverage. Contingent would be, I'm leasing you and Travis a hangar space. I never go in your hangar. I don't touch your airplane. I just lease you space. And if for some reason the hangar were to collapse, or the hangar door collapsed down on your airplane when you're pulling it out, and we got your aircraft carrier subrogated back against us, there's coverage. Your primary would be, you pull up to the front to the pumps and say, hey, Chris, top off the top off the tanks, and then could you put it back in the hangar for me? So we hook it up to a tug, we pull it back and push it in, and we damage it. That's your primary coverage for hangar keepers. So one thing to think about with hangar keepers is the value of airplanes during COVID skyrocketed. For example, a 4-seat single engine airplane called a Cessna 172. It used to be like the older ones, like a 50s, 60s model, were like $35,000 all day long. They skyrocketed, in like 2019, 2020, 2021 to about $100,000. So you had a value increase, you had a rate increase, because of the market. I had an airport recently where they had 250,000 each aircraft, 500,000 any one occurrence. That $250,000 on a newer Cessna 172, that's the going price for one of those. So might want to make sure that we take a look at increasing those limits so that we've got coverage. Typically you're not going to have a total loss, but what about but there's always that possibility.
And that is interesting that those prices have increased, kind of following along with the auto industry as well, right? Well, we've seen these huge increases. Chris, anything else before we wrap it up with Travis that you want to talk to our agents about this morning?
Yeah, I saw someone mention something about 50 plus pound drones. Real quick. So there's any drone, we can do commercial drones. We're not doing recreational. So for example, I got my recreational drone. You went through a course, took a test and so forth. That's not a commercial. That's for commercial use. We don't have an avenue for basically pleasure use only drones, whatever. It's for commercial and so forth. So anyone operating a drone must have what we call a Part 107 remote pilot certificate. When you start talking about the ag drones or those drones over 55 pounds, there's two more things they have to get. They have to get a 44. I forget what it is. It is a 44807 exemption letter. Basically, it's called a certificate or waiver or authorization. So it's a letter from the FAA says you have permission to fly any drone over 55 pounds. And then if they're spraying, they have to get a 137 certificate, which is for spraying chemicals and so forth. So those are things that you will be asked for. Specifically, if it's an ag drone, is those things, because the companies want to make sure that they have them. It used to be like, sure, the check's in the mail, we've got that. And then they have the loss and they're like, well, we requested it, but we haven't got permission yet. So
you have to have it. You have to provide the evidence. Well, Chris, thank you so much. We'll look forward to you helping our agents here further. You've done a great job. There is a lot to unpack here with aviation. We truly appreciate you joining us today. So with that, we're going to turn it back over to Travis. And Travis, if you can talk a little bit about where you see aviation going in 2026 and how do we manage our expectations out here?
Yeah, well, let me start with a little bit longer perspective, and then I'll sort of circle back to the near term. But just over the next 20 years, to put it in one word, opportunity, because you're going to see continued growth in all aspects of aviation. The traditional aircraft fleet, and I'm only talking about general aviation aircraft, so this would exclude airlines. In general aviation, the number of aircraft is expected to grow from about 214,000 to almost 240,000 by 2020. That's across all types. That's piston, fixed wing, rotor wing, turbine, fixed and rotor wing, jets. The FAA is estimating a 20% increase in overall utilization of general aviation aircraft. So not only will there be more planes in the fleet, the planes in use will be used more in various different ways, chartered, owned, etc. So that's a concrete example of opportunities to ride aviation. There are just going to be more aircraft to insure. You're seeing, as pilots are becoming more drawn to these technologically advanced aircraft that we're seeing today, you're going to see a lot of the older aircraft, that portion of the fleet sort of be phased out and replaced with these newer, more advanced aircraft that's just based on consumer, in this case, the pilot's demand. That's what they're looking for these days. And so, the manufacturers are aware of that and they're making adjustments. I won't get too far in the weeds on this, but recently you had the FAA announce their Advanced Air Mobility Initiative, and basically it's their way of preparing for the fact that they're anticipating low altitude flight travel to become a more and more significant element of just all aspects of our life, but especially on the commercial side. And so basically what that entails, it's highly automated aircraft that are usually equipped for vertical takeoff and landing. So think drone, but with the capacity for passengers, and largely electric. So, they're anticipated, and a lot of companies, if you watch enough TV, you'll see lots of companies in the R&D phase of developing these types of aircraft. That's what's coming down the pipeline. So the traditional fleet isn't going anywhere. Standard air travel, your commercial trips, all of that will remain the same and continue to grow. But that's one of the big things that's coming. You talked about drone delivery. That's sort of one aspect of it, but think larger and on a bigger scale, especially for cargo and delivery type operations. So as part of that initiative, the FAA, they plan to increase and grow the overall infrastructure. So that's partnerships with governmental and non-government entities. That's more airports. That's more flight training providers. All the ancillary businesses that go along with more vehicles, more detailing shops, more one-man repair and service operations. All of those things anticipated to increase along with that, infrastructure increase. So, and of course, drones, which you guys have already talked about, fairly extensively. Obviously, as technology and capability continues to advance with those, you're only going to see more and more of them. I think by 2030, it's estimated there'll be 30 million or 3 million drones in use, and commercial will be about half of that. But that percentage will continue to grow. Obviously, lots of recreational drone users, not really pertinent to what we do, but the key takeaway there, I mean, the commercial drone operations are expected to grow indefinitely, for the foreseeable future. So, just as the aviation infrastructure expands, obviously opportunities to write the insurance expand along with it. We'll have to see the marketplace adjust with the increased number of risks that need placement. It will be the aviation marketplace to handle that. And so this is partly speculation, but I think we'll probably see more carriers come on board in the next few years to sort of add the capacity that's going to be needed. But we'll also see our traditional carriers adapt. They're going to need more personnel because it's just an increase in the overall number of risks that need placement. And it's going to be handled by specialized markets, because this is all directed by the FAA, which is basically the key factor in determining whether you need an aviation insurer or not in most cases. We've touched on mostly aircraft, but obviously, like I mentioned, there will be other opportunities to write the support businesses that come along with aircraft. All the things that we're doing now, that's all expected to grow. Again, they're just more and more opportunities is the key takeaway as time progresses. In the short term, I think we're going to be looking at a soft market for the next 1, 2, 3 years at least. There's just too much capacity out there right now. We haven't had any mega nuclear verdicts recently. I mean, they happen, but not like we were seeing 5, 10 years ago. That was a pretty bad trend. There's lots of drivers that will cause that hard market cycle to come about. It's just not going to happen tomorrow. But the positive aspect of that is you've got opportunities with new business, and you've also got opportunities to quote your clients renewals if you know they have a policy, but you stayed away because they've always been happy. Now is probably a better time than ever to approach them about quoting a renewal. Obviously, we don't really advocate for moving business around constantly, for a few bucks or for some insignificant reason. And I still don't, largely for the commercial side, especially the more complex your risk, the more likely you need a long-term partner as an insurer. But if you're just an individual with an aircraft, I mean, honestly, right now, you should probably be shopping. Most pilots do anyway. They tend to be a wealthier group, but they also tend to be a frugal group. So, if your broker hasn't looked around for you in a couple of years, especially just as an individual non-commercial aircraft owner, which is the bulk of what you're going to see in terms of an opportunity as an agent, now would be a good time to approach them.
Wonderful. Well, there is a lot going on. And when you mentioned this, the lower level, I started thinking about the jets.
The jets, right.
The flying cars. Like, it seems so unrealistic, but it's out there. Like,
It's coming.
The space
it is
is
coming.
so much increased. You even mentioned the electric piece of it. So not only cars, but now planes. And so the opportunities are just going to be continuing and really tremendous for our agents out there. So Travis, you are a wonderful, presenter today as far as a wealth of information and help. We have some questions out here about learning more. So I think both you and Chris are going to get some calls. And if there's anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap it up today, as far as reaching out to the team and calling any of you, you get them in the right hands. Any specific advice to our agents?
No, I think we've covered it. Just don't let it deter you. It's I promise you can do it. And we've got your back in handling anything. And conference calls, whatever you need to do. If it's justifies a physical visit, my team, they've got the autonomy to go do that, and that's absolutely fine. Whatever we need to help get it done.
And that is fantastic. So we have that saying here at Arlington Road that we throw around quite often. Don't say no, call Arlington Row. And your team obviously lives and breathes that. So to our agents today, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. We hope you learned more about our our aviation department. And I want to thank our Arlington Row associates as well. This has been an excellent session this morning. So thank you again, Travis, and thank you, Chris. We appreciate all your help. I don't see any more questions at this time. So this will conclude our session of the Francis Rose Center for Professional Growth. Have a great day, everyone.